Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and today we're talking about the PlayStation 5 Pro because I got it. I spent my own money to actually purchase this to do a brutally honest review. Now this thing, including the cost of the disk drive that you have to buy separately, this cost me $800. But let's talk about this and talk about the goods and the bads because I still feel like for the price tag, it is just such a big chunk of change. So, do I regret buying it? Let's talk. Hi, hope you're having a good day, and if you could, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's begin with the obvious, which is the point of the PlayStation 5 Pro. The PS5 has now been out for a little over 4 years, right? And in that time, we've continued to see graphics improve as developers get better with the tools, get better at the engines and stuff. They're continuing to make graphics that are more 4K, 60 FPS, some stuff even exceeding 60 FPS. So I think a lot of people are kind of going, okay, how good are graphics going to be by the end of this generation? And so Sony is releasing this mid-gen refresh to really push those boundaries now. It seems like the PlayStation 6 is not going to be out until probably 2028 or 2030. So this is that time to say, okay, if you are obsessed with graphics, if you have a really, really big TV that you don't mind sitting close to, this is going to make sure so every pixel, every frame rate, every single bit of this is the perfect, expensive experience you want. Now, in my opinion, Sony's been releasing a lot of these kind of rather niche high premium products for the last couple years. In fact, I've reviewed a lot of them. Stuff like the PlayStation Edge controller. They released a $200 PS5 controller. And yeah, man, it's good. I don't think it's $200 good, but it is good. They also did stuff like the PlayStation Portal, which allows you to stream PlayStation 5 games onto a tiny screen in case, you're in a house and you got a bunch of kids that are constantly taking up the TV to watch Bluey. Sony is clearly trying to diversify their mix of hardware releases and software releases, right? New games and new consoles. And the Pro is catering to that upper demographic. It is for people that buy a lot of PlayStation games made by PlayStation who want to have the best graphics possible. Now, let's begin with the promise of the Pro, right? As I record this, about 90 games are getting boosted by it. There is this system called Game Boost, where essentially, when the PlayStation 5 first came out, we had this new set of graphical options. This is something that was rather new, where you could actually, with a lot of major titles, pick between having optimized graphics or optimized frame rates. Now, this is something that, of course, has always existed with PC gaming, but it was nice that we finally had a version of that on consoles. But the mixed results of it were a bit frustrating. I mean, you would get games that looked really good, but had horrible frame rate, or you had stuff that was liquidy smooth, but barely even hit 1080p resolution. The PlayStation 5 Pro is now creating an interesting middle ground, something they're calling Fidelity Pro, which is a mix of the best graphics possible and a mix of the best frame rate. And a lot of times for AAA stuff, it means games running perhaps at 60 FPS, sometimes even 4K, or trying to sacrifice it for things like extra ray tracing, which is cool reflective effects. Now, after having played this a couple hours, I think this is the kind of thing where, as good as it looks, as nice as these upgrades are, I still feel like this is a very tiny niche product. If you're the kind of person that is utterly obsessed specifically with Sony Studio stuff, like you want to make sure freaking God of War looks as good as absolutely possible, this is definitely good for you. Some of the stuff I played that was actually by PlayStation Studios, like Ratchet and Clank and stuff, they look exceptionally good. The two games that really melted my mind the most because of how substantial the upgrade was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Spider-Man 2. Now, let's start off talking about the webhead because this has a bunch of different options. the best games that really utilize the best of the Pro, I like the fact that they actually have different graphical toggles. So you can say, okay, I want to have the best possible frame rate, or I do want ray tracing, but I also want it to be 4K. I love the fact that there's these different tiers of being able to pick the best possible visuals for your personal tastes. And with some stuff, specifically like Spider-Man 2, these are the most realistic reflections I have ever seen in a video game ever. And I am straight up dead serious about that. I mean, this looks so good. Now, I have heard a critique a lot online. Kind of the major pushback against the Pro is people saying, do we really need to get better graphics than this? Where was that? I saw a tweet that said, I feel like we're at a point where improved graphics just don't matter. And I think that is a fair sentiment. The PlayStation 5 Pro just looks so good, it runs so good. I do feel like it's very difficult to imagine the PlayStation 6. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a PlayStation 7. The PlayStation 5 Pro looks so good. I just can't imagine something going generations beyond this, right? Now, the other game I wanted to talk about, of course, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So this game had a lot of graphical issues when you first played it. On a base model PS5, the graphics were downright blurry. Now, I want to make this clear because some people say, oh, I don't care about how a game looks. Yeah, I have that sentiment as well. I mean, I play way too many hours of stuff like Vampire Survivors and Balatro, and yeah, so I'm saying graphics aren't everything, but blurry visuals, constant frame drops, they are more than just aggravating, they become distracting. Whereas now in the PlayStation 5 Pro version, it looks like a straight up remaster. I mean, it actually looks like they took it back to the lab and rebuilt the game from the ground up. It literally looks that good. I mean, if you love FF7 Rebirth, if this is your favorite game of the year, I honestly think that if you have $700 laying around, this alone is kind of worth the price tag. Another major feature that kind of jumped out at me while kind of just playing some random games that I love the most is a feature they call Game Boost. Now, what this does is instead of just being a straight up upgrade where it's actually just boosting it in a code standpoint, instead, certain games are getting like a 30% performance boost because of the upgraded GPU. Essentially, because this is a more powerful console, stuff like Elden Ring, if you turn on the higher graphics mode, typically it gets pretty hard stuck at 30 FPS. Now it runs at about 40 or 45 FPS, which, to be fair, it's still not as good as we would hope. Of course, on a console, you would want it to be hard locked at 60 FPS, but it is interesting the games that do get that boost. Some, though, are immune to it. Stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is still one of the best looking PlayStation 4 games of all time. It still practically looks like a PS5 game. It is still stuck at 30 FPS. Same with stuff like Bloodborne. Now, it does do something with the resolution, with the crispiness of it. The images itself does look better, but to me, games that are already that gorgeous, that are already that outstanding visually, I want a smoother experience instead of just a higher resolution experience, right? Now, let me just talk about some other random ones that I tested out that really blew my mind. Dragon's Dogma 2, I loved this game this year. I know some people didn't. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I actually had that much fun with it, but if you played it on console, it was hard stuck at 30 FPS, which was extremely aggravating, especially during like dragon hunting and stuff like that. It is now 60 FPS, and it looks incredibly good. I did have a little bit of issues here and there with some of the frame rate, but it's definitely a much smoother experience. Stellar Blade just today actually got a complete patch that boosts the heck out of the image quality, and it uses PSSR. So the way this is making it look better is by using AI upscaling and creating extra interpolated frames, I think is the term. So essentially, it's making the image smoother manually via the power of the Pro, and stuff like Stellar Blade, the implementations, the way this looks is clearly just off the charts. Also, games that existed before that had small issues like Silent Hill 2, anybody who beat Silent Hill 2 on the PlayStation 5, obviously that game was a very big deal. God, I love that game a lot. It had these random frame stutters. Game Boost has completely eliminated the frame stutters. It makes it look so much better. You can play this in performance mode or graphics mode, and no matter what now, it absolutely looks fantastic. Now, I feel like the best example of how how much better this looks with ray tracing is actually Alan Wake 2. So inside the Pro, they have invented this extra higher resolution, quicker and sharper looking ray tracing, meaning that it actually looks as perfect as possible. Let me just show you. I'm flipping on the ray tracing right here. I'm flipping it on and off while standing in a very reflective elevator in the newest piece of DLC for Alan Wake 2. And yeah, it is insane how realistic it manages to simulate not just a reflection, but multiple reflections simultaneously. I feel like the PlayStation 5 Pro creates the best product possible, especially if you are into Sony games. It does feel like the third-party games that are actually utilizing it, stuff like, I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but I've heard they finally smoothed out some of the frame rate issues with stuff like Baldur's Gate 3, which is now hard-locked at 60 FPS and 4K. But I gotta say, this does feel like the kind of thing where the closer you sit to the TV and the bigger your TV is, it does look better. When I normally am reviewing games, I got a little 41-inch TV. It's the one that's sitting here right next to me, and normally when I'm playing it for stuff like Grand Theft Auto and stuff, I'm pretty dang up close. And the differences in this were not that noticeable when it came to resolution or extra fidelity, right? When I noticed it the most is when I was sitting on my couch, which is in front of a 60-inch TV. It's a 4K Ultra HD OLED, stuff like that. Sitting in front of that TV, even as close as I'm sitting, that's when I can actually appreciate and see just how wild the frame rate, the visuals, the resolution actually is. But I think the part of this that actually grabbed me the most is that some games go over 60 FPS. There are 120 frames a second games. Stuff like Resident Evil Village runs at 120 FPS. I mean, that's what they claim. I booted it up. I don't have a frame counter, but it dang clearly is way over 60 FPS, and it is such a smooth experience. It's almost surreal. So I will say this to really kind of sum it up. I don't regret buying the PlayStation 5 Pro, but this is an incredibly niche product. The performance difference that we got with the PlayStation 4 versus the PlayStation 4 Pro, and compare that gap to the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, it's a much tinier bump. But if you have the money for it, I do think it is worth it. I managed to get my PlayStation 5 Pro for just a little over $300 total. So my girlfriend bought my current PS5 off of me. I've got a PlayStation 5 Slim. I gave her a bunch of games and an extra controller and stuff like that. So it is a good deal. And then I bought this. So spending about $300 on this instead of $800 on this, I think it is a appealing and worthwhile upgrade. But if you're just a person that's playing on a 1080p TV in a tiny little dorm room, I would not at all think this is worth it. But these have just been some thoughts. What do you guys think about the PlayStation 5 Pro? And I have noticed a big effort of people kind of lambasting anybody who is excited for it. I think I'm in a camp where I was ambivalent. I didn't think it looked that good. I definitely thought it was too expensive. Now that I had it, I think it's cool. Still definitely not mandatory. But give me your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you could, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. I'll show you, look at this. This is the last thing, look at this. Here's the normal PS5 that I'm giving to my girl. This is the Pro. Oh, they're like the same size. Look at that. This is a $100,000 microphone, or megaphone. What am I doing? Why is this my life?
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.